joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton from the great state of Arkansas. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Hey, Hugh. It's great to be on with you.
Senator, last night I was surprised as I was doing show prep to find a story in the Telegraph that said U.S. moves to stop Israel's invasion of Rafah. So I looked at the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, nothing. Then I found at Fox News, Biden to go to UN Security Council to force temporary ceasefire on Israel, halt Rafah offensive. And still nothing all night long on the big three until this morning it showed up. Were you aware that the UN was floating a ceasefire resolution at the Security Council?
Hugh, only through news reporting at places you mentioned, in British tabloids or the Israeli press or from social media that finally caught up to it this morning. I would say, Hugh, it's a shocking betrayal of Israel by Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, but it's not shocking, Hugh. It's barely even surprising. I mean, remember, at the end of the Obama administration, they allowed the Security Council to pass an anti-Israel resolution, and now apparently they're going to author an anti-Israel resolution calling on Israel not to continue conducting this existential war of survival to root out Hamas from one of its last strongholds in Gaza, Rafah, in no small part on the basis of electoral politics, Hugh, because Joe Biden is below 40% in the polls, and he's worried about losing a couple cities in Michigan, a critical swing state. Again, I would say it's shocking, but it's not even surprising, but it's certainly disgraceful.
Well, the end of the Obama administration, the resolution he referred to, he wasn't running for re-election. That was just his anti-Israel bias coming out. Here you've got Joe Biden. Don't American Jews follow this? Do you think they're even aware that they're about to be sold out by Joe Biden?
Well, it goes much farther than just American Jews. It's all Americans who stand with Israel, who recognize that Israel was the target of a heinous attack on October 7th, the worst massacre of Jews since World War II. And if anything, the United States should be going to the UN Security Council proposing resolutions demanding that Hamas immediately release all of its hostages, to include multiple American citizens. That's what every American, whatever their faith, should expect from the Biden administration. But, of course, that's not what we're going to get from Joe Biden.
Now, Senator, you're one of the few senators who've actually been in combat. You were in Baghdad during the surge with the 101st Airborne. You know what it's like when you finish a battle for a city like Fallujah or Mosul against ISIS, Fallujah against insurgents. You don't leave the last major stronghold standing, right? You don't not go into Rafah and leave Hamas there, or you haven't won.
Yeah, of course not, Hugh. I mean, consider our battle against ISIS. We took back much territory from ISIS in Syria and Iraq. At one point, their so-called caliphate was larger than the state of Indiana. When it finally was reduced down to just Mosul and a few other places, the battle in Mosul took many, many months, and unfortunately thousands of civilian casualties because ISIS used civilians as human shields, as does Gaza. But we didn't stop. We didn't wring our hands. We continued until we finished the job. That's exactly what Israel is doing right now, under, frankly, much tougher circumstances than we ever fought in Iraq or Afghanistan because of the vast subterranean network that Hamas was allowed to build for 17 years when it controlled Gaza, with the United Nations and every other aid provider to Gaza looking the other way as they diverted things like cement and concrete from homes for families into tunnels so they could attack Jews.
Now, this may be a trial balloon that Joe Biden is unaware of, as he apparently was unaware of the Chinese spy balloon. What do you think? Do you think that they would float this without the president knowing about it?
With this administration, Hugh, sometimes it's hard to tell. But if it's a trial balloon, it should certainly be popped immediately. And it's ill-advised to even float as a trial balloon. It's like a couple of weeks ago when you had a report that the administration was considering not just delaying the delivery of offensive weapons like missiles, but even defensive weapons, air defense interceptors to protect civilian populations in Israel. Just the fact of floating such trial balloons undercuts Israel and emboldens Hamas and makes Hamas apologists think that if they just wait out Joe Biden for a couple more days or a couple more weeks, the United States will cave. Hugh, I was saying this on October 7th and 8th, the very first weekend of this atrocity in Israel, that what Israel needs more than anything is time and freedom of action. yes, it's important that we provide them with additional shells and ammunition. But what they need more than anything is time and freedom of action from the kind of inevitable, one-sided attacks that they get from the rest of the world and international organizations like the United Nations. But I had no confidence that Joe Biden would give them that time and freedom of action despite his early and positive rhetoric. And that's, of course, what we began to see just weeks after the attack.
Now, I want to switch to a second subject, which is Putin. Putin killed Navalny last week. In this brand new book, I'm going to talk with Alex Ward tomorrow about his book, The Internationalist. It clearly went to press before 10/7. Back in the era when Team Biden thought they were masters of the universe and were running the Middle East in 10/7, they didn't know about it. And in here, they say that at the Geneva summit in June of 2021, Biden confronted Putin on Navalny and warned him. Well, apparently Putin doesn't care what Biden thinks, because if this book is right and they gave him complete access, Putin blew off Biden when it came to Navalny. Do you think it helps or it hurts the other dissidents in Russia for Biden to speak up about them? Because I'm kind of afraid if Biden points at something, Putin kills that person just to show him he doesn't care what Biden thinks.
Well, first off, Hugh, I haven't read the book. I've seen the reports. I'm not sure I credit the reports. Yet another example of how Joe Biden conveniently is tough and effective behind closed doors when no one's watching. Kind of like Anthony Michael Hall's character in The Breakfast Club, who had many friends in the Niagara Falls area that no one had ever seen or heard of. But America can't afford another erased red line. Apparently, that's exactly what we're getting with Alexei Navalny. Joe Biden, said publicly that he would hold Vladimir Putin accountable. Apparently, he wants to take credit for being a tough guy and getting chesty with Putin at the summit 3 years ago about Navalny. And I have not yet seen a single action we've taken to try to impose any consequences for the brutal murder of Alexei Navalny. And that suggests that Vladimir Putin is not scared of Joe Biden. But then again, we knew that. That's why he invaded Ukraine. No one is scared of Joe Biden. That's why you have war and disorder breaking out all around the world.
Now, Senator, you're on Intel and on armed services, and you never violate classified doctrine. But do you know if it's possible, as a matter of public sources, to disintermediate Putin from his assets? Because I don't think we've done that yet. Just actually take his stuff.
Well, I mean, Hugh, in a certain way, it's hard to do that to Vladimir Putin personally, because Vladimir Putin has, a view of himself like the Tsar did, that he is the state, and that there is no distinction between Russian assets and Putin's own personal wealth. One thing that we can start with doing is to disintermediate Russia for more than $300 billion sitting in the United States and mostly in Europe. I've long supported efforts by Western governments to seize those assets, as we did in World War II. Frankly, in World War II, we seized private assets of the citizens of belligerent nations, and to use them not just for reconstructing a country that's in the middle of a war, but helping that country win its war. So that's one first step we could take, is to show some leadership on that front. Now, the United States, again, doesn't have many of these assets, maybe just $5 billion of the $300+ billion, but probably no European nation will take that action unless the United States moves first and provides them with the political cover to seize the assets in their borders.
Now, Senator, the highest tree in the Putin forest usually gets shut down and chopped down. Right now, that's Vladimir Kara-Murza. He's the last pro-democracy activist. He's a resident of America, but he went back like Navalny, and now he's up in the Arctic Circle in one of the concentration camps that he's running. Does it help or hurt him for the President of the United States to talk about him? Because I do worry that Putin just kills whomever Biden says is under his personal protection. Well,
he probably is now the most prominent dissident in Russia. And, I mean, there is a distinction between him and Alexei Navalny. If memory serves, he is a permanent legal resident of the United States. And his wife and his children are American citizens.
Yes.
And therefore, we have an even greater interest in his well-being than we did in Alexei Navalny's. I think it's a sad state of affairs, though, when we have to question whether or not it's good for an American permanent legal resident or husband of and father of American citizens to have his name brought up by the American president. And again, it just goes to show how little respect and fear the world has for Joe Biden.
Well, Leader McConnell's not afraid of Putin. I think Putin is afraid of Leader McConnell. I hope he gets up and speaks on behalf of Kara Mirza. Last question, Senator. When are we going to get the vote on the Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel money? Because we got to get that money to Ukraine. They suffered a setback on the battlefield, and we need to resupply them.
Hugh, the ball is in the House's court right now. The Speaker said he won't take up the bill the Senate passed. I didn't vote for that bill because, one, I thought we had to do something to address our own border situation. But two, it also still included $19 billion of non-defense aid, which would be better left not spent in an era of trillion-dollar deficit and certainly not going to Hamas. But if you're going to spend it, better spend on things like 3 new submarines or 170 new F-35 stealth fighters or other critical munitions. So I hope the House takes up the bill, alters and improves it, and then sends it back to us and does so promptly.
Now, has there been any indication that that is the plan? Because I think that is the plan, but I haven't seen it publicly discussed.
I gather from my friends in the House that there are conversations right now going on. The House, like the Senate, is not in session this week, but conversations going on about what can garner enough bipartisan support to pass across the House of Representatives. Again, the Speaker has made clear that what the Senate passed in its current form cannot pass. So I hope that those negotiations yield fruit.
Now, Senator, I don't know that Ukraine can win, given the manpower disparity, but I know they can lose. And if we don't get them anything, they will lose. Do you think they can win, or is it just a question of them not losing?
Well, it's going to be a tough road to victory, and I don't think you're going to see in 2024 the kind of large-scale offensives you saw in 2023 on either side. What I think Ukraine needs right now is what people like Secretary of Defense Bob Gates have called for, or former Deputy National Security Advisor Stephen Hadley, the munitions to build in an active defense to make sure they don't lose significant new chunks of territory, while also gaining time to train at the battalion, brigade level above in combined arms warfare. And they need the combined arms. The Biden administration criticized them last year, but didn't give them the arms to win. And hopefully that sets up the condition for, on the battlefield, to push Putin onto his back foot and give Ukraine a better stance for negotiations.
Senator Tom Cotton, thank you for joining me this morning. Talk to you again next week. From Arkansas, we count on him for the latest on what's going on in the world. Thank you, Senator.